it's not going to pop up anyway, so don't worry about it. So today, looking at the spread of Islam, we're going to be looking at the time following Muhammad's death. So Muhammad is going to start the religion of Islam, but he is going to die not long after starting the faith and taking over Mecca. We don't know what exactly happened. He just got sick and passed away. And that's something that throughout history, we have these times where famous, important people, they pass away unexpectedly. And Muhammad hadn't gone and said, hey, Bob, you're going to be the next guy in charge, okay? So we're going to see some issues and how that's going to be solved here. And we're going to be looking at now. So we start with the death of Muhammad. So at 632, Muhammad dies. And of course, because people just can't seem to get along, as soon as they took the customary time, oh, we need to be upset, they started arguing with each other, saying who should be the next boss. And the person who was the successor to Muhammad, the person in charge of the religion of Islam, much like how we have the Pope for Catholic Christianity, is going to be titled the Caliph. Now, that's the anglicized way of saying it, meaning like what people over in England and then America start saying anglicized. Really, you'll hear it more pronounced way more awesomely Caliph if you hear anyone who is not from, England or America. So Caliph is the best way to probably say it, but Caliph is how boring people like me learn how to say it. Now, the first of the caliphs are going to be people that were close to Muhammad. They all knew him as well, and personally live. So, and they actually made their capital in Medina, which once again we see how Europeans translating Arabic names are going to be dumb and spell it Medina instead of Medina. I know, isn't it crazy? Like, why do we have this constantly? So it doesn't matter what source you're in, it's something different. Now, all of the caliphs had something in common where they wanted to go and spread the message of Islam. And the first 4 caliphs, they were going to die. And we're going to wind up going and having a new dynasty. And the dynasty really goes on with the caliphs. I know this is getting kind of confusing. I apologize. But we're going to have 4 caliphs. They are all not going to live very long. And then we're going to have a group called the Umayyads ruling from Damascus, this Muslim empire. And basically, it's going to be this bottom map right there. And they picked Damascus because it's in the middle. Now, they picked this middle city because now Islam is going to spread not to just Arabs, but to Egyptians, to Persians, to Uzbeks, to all sorts of different people. It's going to go in present-day Iran, which they called Persia back then. It's going to go to India eventually. It's going to go to Afghanistan. It's going to go to North Africa. It's going to go all the way to Spain. It's going to wind up being in the Southeast Asian islands like Indonesia. It's going to spread like wildfire, Islam. Now, we're not really going to get too much into those first 4 caliphs. We're going to talk about some of the drama between them a little bit later on. But you just need to know, after the caliphs, we have a group called the Umayyads ruling. Umayyad. And no, that is not the Damascus. That's in Maryland. That's the Damascus in Syria. That's over here. So let's take a look at by 750 where Islam has spread. Look how far that is. That's kind of amazing. And it's making the Byzantines super duper nervous because who used to rule a lot of that land? The Byzantines. And they're taking, because they are kicking their keisters every single battle, it seems. It's one of those things that we saw in the video with John Green about how people started going and thinking, well, maybe this, religion has something to it because they've been so victorious all of the time, even defeating the Byzantines and the Sassanids. Now, as we argued, that the Sassanids in Persia and the Byzantines, they've been fighting each other so long they're both exhausted. And when the, Arabs came, they just were able to steamroll them over. But from Spain to India, pretty cool. So why though? Why are they able to kick so much keister? Why are they able to be so dominant on the battlefield? Well, first off, the Arabs spent a ton of time on horseback. A ton of time on horseback, ton of time on camels. Because you have to remember, before Muhammad, the Arab tribes had been battling civil wars for all of time. Muhammad brought them together because before that, they were always fighting and killing each other. So if your whole history is fighting, you're going to be really, really good at fighting. Just like when we talked about the Spartans last year. Their whole history was war. So they were really stinking good at war. Here's another thing, though. They believed that their religion called them to go forth and spread it. So they wanted the whole world to know God's message. So they had good motivation. Plus, here's another big thing that the people fighting for Islam, the warriors, wound up thinking. They said, well, I'm going to fight my best. And if I win, guess what? I'm doing God's will. That's awesome. If I die, I'm going to go to paradise because I died fighting for my God. So it was like a win-win situation. Now, I don't know about you. I still don't want to look like Swiss cheese and be sliced and diced. But, if you have that in the back of your mind, at least that it would, you have paradise to look forward to. That's pretty good. Now, we have to think about this too, that our Arabs, and then eventually it's more than Arabs, are Muslims that are going and fighting these wars. They're inspired by their religion to spread it. The people they're fighting, what are they fighting for? They're fighting for some distant emperor or king that they didn't know, who they just pay taxes to and doesn't treat them very nicely to continue to rule them. So a lot of times people are going to be like, yeah, come on in. We don't want to fight you. Go ahead. Take it. Because they don't have the same motivation. Now, here's the other thing. Typically, when Muslims conquered, they were actually pretty chill rulers. Sometimes they paid less taxes under Muslim rule than they did under like Byzantine rule. So when they were, conquered, they were really more like they were liberated because they were kept their own religion. So they didn't have to convert. They often paid less taxes, and it was fine. Now, what did happen was Christians and Jews were told to be treated with respect. They're called people of the book. Muhammad wrote about this, how basically Muslims, Christians, and Jews should all get along because following with it. So Judaism was the first of the monotheistic religions, and Christians would say they built off of Judaism, and then Muslims say they built off the two of them, that they were the final revelation. So they're supposed to be treated with respect. So typically there weren't massacres or murders or things like that. Now, what did happen, though, is if you stayed Christian or Jewish, you often were expected to pay a secondary tax. And so what happened was, because, they didn't want to pay that tax, many people wound up converting, actually, and said, well, it's monotheistic, so we'll go with it. So we're going to see tons of conversions from conquered areas, and probably a big motivation was to pay less taxes. That's just the reality of things. People don't like to pay taxes. Just like how John Green was like, hey, taxes made people stop smoking, or as much, because very few people smoke today, whereas tons of people smoked when I was a kid because they added more taxes. Same kind of idea. Now, it's not just all military conquest, though. There's often this misconception that Islam only spread through the sword, which there was conquest, there was conquering, don't get me wrong, but also, much like with Christianity and Buddhism, missionaries went through many distant lands going and teaching Islam. Now, these missionaries were called Sufis, which gets a little confusing because there's actually another sect of Islam called Sufi Islam, which we are not going to get into at all. But Sufis, for our terms for the vocabulary, they're going to be missionaries who are going to go around spreading the word of Muhammad. Another thing, we're going to see that merchants are going to play a huge role in the development of Islam. Muhammad himself was a merchant. So such a profession was highly regarded, thinking, if that job was good enough for the Prophet, it's good enough for me. And so merchants, they would go, and we've talked about this so many times. Sahil is not a robot. He's not going to go up to Simon and say, hello, Simon, here are your goods. The price is $5. And then Simon goes, here is $5. Thank you, Sahil. Goodbye. No, they're going to talk, say, oh, what's going on? Talk about the, local sports team or whatever. And, then, Sahil might be like, so I've heard about this really cool new religion. And then Simon's like, tell me more. And, then they would talk. And a lot of conversions happen because of merchants. And like I said, it's going to go very far-reaching. Indonesia in Southeast Asia, Timbuktu in West Africa. Islam is going to spread all around. And that, my cherubs, is our notes for the day. So I hope that you learned something. Do we have any questions